and let's go ahead and get into this second segment where we go ahead and we talk about Luka Dončić and his potential MVP and his MVP race, and if he has a chance to go ahead and win the MVP, given the recency bias in his recent games. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull up some stats real quick. Just give me 1 quick second for me to do that. Okay, so I have the stats pulled up right now, and Luka Dončić recently, Luka Dončić is a phenomenal basketball player, and he is one of the best basketball players that the NBA has ever seen, and one of the best players in the league right now. So, obviously, it's a little surprising that he's not in much MVP talks later on in the season throughout the previous years that he's been a player. Now, he's the first player since LeBron with 10,000 points, 3,000 assists, and 3,000 rebounds before turning 25 years old. Now, before this last game that they played, they were on a 7-game winning streak, and they did that the minute they got Kyrie back after a 6-game absence due to injury. And Luka Dončić, it's very complicated with Luka Dončić and the MVP because he's always in MVP talks, but his teams, they're just never really good enough in the regular season to put him over the hump of a lot of the other players who are doing great things but leading their teams to winning records. Now, what I mean by that is that the league is going through a change in terms of scoring. So, a lot of teams now, it's a lot easier to score the ball, and given the amount of threes that people take, and given the amount of isolation, how ISO heavy the game has become, it's a lot easier for individual players to rack up great numbers because their offense is essentially ran through them most of the time, especially in Luka's case because of how dominant he is with the ball and how easily he can create shots for his teammates. And it's why wouldn't you put the ball in his hands 24/7? If he's going to constantly create a good shot, then give him the ball. It's that simple. But even with all of this, even the fact that the NBA knows, and even if all the fans know how good Luka is, but despite that, he can never manage to finish in the top votings for MVP. Now, why? And the why is because it's essentially a team-based award. Most valuable player is not best player. It's most valuable. And where does a team find its value? It finds its value in winning. So if you don't end up winning a lot of games, or if you don't end up getting a high seed, and you're putting up these numbers, how valuable are you compared to someone who's probably putting up the exact same numbers as you, but winning the games while doing it? It's a completely different ball game when you just look at the stats than when you look at stats and wins, because again, there are some cases where the MVP voting, a lot of the fans they ignore the stats completely, or a lot of the voters, they just completely ignore the team. No, they ignore the team record completely. Vice versa sometimes, honestly. They ignore the team record sometimes, and they give it to the player that was actually legitimately the best player on the team, the best player ever, in the season, how they did with Russell Westbrook in 2017, giving him the MVP after he became the first player since Oscar Robertson to average a triple-double in an NBA season. Now, that MVP was the only MVP that was different because there was a little bit of a story involved in that MVP. So The year before Russ won that MVP, the Thunder lost 3-1 to the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Thunder lost 3-1 to the Golden State Warriors, And obviously, we all know what happens right after that. Kevin Durant decides to join the Golden State Warriors, leaving Russell Westbrook on his own to try to lift his team to the playoffs however he could. So, given that, nobody really expected that much from the Thunder, let alone nobody expected that much from Russ. Russell Westbrook that was his best season of his entire career, and it completely defined his legacy. Because afterwards, after that incredible season, he ended up doing it 4 more times, and that was like the staple to him. Like, he was the triple-double machine. That's what he was. And while he was on the Thunder in that first year, he was absolutely phenomenal. Now, the Thunder finished 7th in the Western Conference, I believe. 7th or 6th, one of the two. And they were not a winning team. Like, obviously they were not a winning team when you're that low in the seedings. And I believe he's the only MVP that won an MVP that was that low in the seedings. Because, again, it's usually down to team record and who the best player is on the best team. And he was able to win the MVP because of the story and because of the ridiculous numbers that he was averaging. Because, I mean, like, who doesn't love that story? A point guard gets, like, just think about it. A star point guard gets betrayed by his star teammate, and now comes out of the next season with a vengeance to prove how good he is. And it's like, how could you not? Like, how could you not like that? Now, he might have taken a ridiculous amount of shots, but it didn't matter because he was the only player on the team, and he was literally his argument for that MVP was that if he wasn't on the Thunder, they wouldn't be in the playoffs, and that was his argument to winning that MVP. And while I understand that argument, and while I understand why that argument should work on Luka Dončić, I don't really agree with it. Just because, like, I mean, again, it should be based on team record should be like it should have effect on like the MVP voting, in my opinion, because that's how you find value, especially now in this NBA where teams are scoring like so much faster and so much better that it's like, okay, everybody is already producing similar numbers that you are. All you got to do is win now. And it's like, it's really difficult. Like, Luka was born in a really difficult time because, like, he's in the same league as Jokic, who is also scoring, who is also getting a lot of triple-doubles and is getting them at a much more efficient rate than Luka Dončić is getting his triple-doubles, and is also getting them at an arguably more consistent rate than Luka Dončić. So, and to top on the fact that he's winning and his team is winning, it's very difficult to say that Luka deserves the MVP when there's somebody like Jokic in the league. Like, do I think Luka's gonna win the MVP this year? No. I think it's wraps for Jokic, assuming he doesn't get injured or assuming he doesn't sit out a lot of games. But other than that, I think Jokic has secured the MVP because, like, he's literally a triple-double machine. He gets one practically every single night, and every single night that he gets one, his team ends up winning. That is value. That is what value is. And he's done it day in and day out every single year. And it's really unfortunate for Luka, because Luka's always, like, he's a dog. Everyone knows Luka's a dog, and he's a phenomenal player. And it's just every single time his teams they're just not good enough to make it. And it's really, like, it's a bit frustrating sometimes if you're Luka, especially if you're Luka, like, because if he just has the help, if he just has a little bit of help, then he'll be in that MVP conversation. Just put him in that 3 seed, and then he'll be in the same spot that Shai's in right now, which I won't even lie to you guys. I really don't agree with Shai being in the top 3 for MVP over somebody like over people like Giannis and Luka Dončić. But that is just my personal opinion, because I think Luka Dončić is like a much better player than Shai, and I think Shai has a much better team all around than Luka Dončić. Yes, Luka Dončić has Kyrie Irving, but actually, wait a minute. The argument now, there might not be an argument for Shai having a better team than Luka Dončić. Now there might not be that argument now, because after recent trades, this Mavs team has looked really, really solid. So that might not be an argument going on into the future. So then the argument would be based on like raw skill alone, and probably placement. I feel placement has more like focus on the team, because again, not one player can carry a team every single night, day in and day out. It just doesn't work like that. And like it's like they could try to do it. They could try to put up numbers and like do it, but it's no guarantee that they would end up coming out with a win. And that's sort of the stipulation that Luka has. Now, Jokic doesn't have that stipulation, because it's like if Jokic gets a triple-double, it's like guaranteed that the Denver Nuggets are going to win. But if Luka does it, it's not entirely guaranteed, which is another argument for Luka's MVP chances. And again, like I really like Luka, and I really think he deserves an MVP. It's just his teams are like never there to do it for him. Now, should the MVP be more focused on individual performances? Like, no. I don't think it should anymore. Like, Russ had it lucky that one year because of the story, and I think that should be the only MVP that ever wins it, being below a 3rd seed or like a 2nd or a 1st seed. And obviously, like with no Joel Embiid, that gives him room. And honestly, now that I think about it, like, I don't even think Luka, like, as of right now, like, I don't even think Luka's going to be in the top 3 in the MVP talks. I think it's going to be Jokic, Giannis, and Shai that are going to be in that talk, because right now Giannis is on pace to being the only player in NBA history to ever average 30 points on 60% efficiency. So with that in mind, we might not even see Luka still in the MVP conversation, unless like they go on a big streak again, because the only reason why I think Luka would have a chance is because of voter fatigue and recency bias. Now, voter fatigue and recency bias, they play a very huge factor in a lot of these MVP races, and more often than not, the player that ends hot has much more of a chance to win the MVP than the player that starts hot. So if Luka can end hot, there's a chance that we could see him winning the MVP. But again, if Luka starts, well, not if Jokic continues to play as great as he has and doesn't like lose any more games than he does, I don't see Luka having an argument for being in the MVP conversation at that point. But I mean, we'll have to see going on into the future. Obviously, like anything can happen with the way that these MVPs go, and with how talented a lot of these players are. And it could really go with any of them. Like, you could give the MVP to Giannis, you could give the MVP to Jokic, you can give the MVP to Luka. It could really go either way, but we'll end up seeing how this goes towards the end of the year. But with that, we're out of time for the second segment, and hopefully we can get into the third segment without my microphone dying on me yet again, where I give a quick recap of the NBA. and some of the games that happened last weekend, and the games that happened yesterday in particular, because those were the games that happened most recently, and those were the games that I ended up tuning into the most. So I will be right back after this short break.